Hey everybody, welcome to Womanwise Healthy Living. I have got with me my good friend Scott Cooper, and Scott and I met several years ago working on a project here in Virginia, and then he did this very strange thing and ended up being from South Carolina. He is the owner of Misty Morning Farms in Edgefield County, South Carolina. He's co-owner of Sweetwater Grass Fattened Meats, and that's a company specializing in naturally raised meats. Serving the greater, I guess that's, what is CRSA, Scott? Oh, Central Savannah River area.
Yes. That's a greater Augusta region.
Okay, it's a greater Augusta region. That's awesome. He is also very active in this community. He serves in local county government, and he is the executive director of High Frontier. And what did I leave out? You do every time I see you, you've got a whole new group going thing.
Well, I follow your lead. I just try and stay very busy, Karen.
So what we're doing tonight is, as part of expanding health span, it's healthy eating, right? I mean, it's good supplementation, hydration, being in a good community, your spiritual walk, your activity levels, but having good, clean food to eat is absolutely key. And I think a lot of us have been really concerned, especially I think in the last 5 to 8 years, because when something changes in the food supply, it takes a while, almost a generation, I think, for us to see that in our health. Right. And how many of us know growing up, how many of you knew people with peanut allergies growing up? Hardly anybody. A lot of different reasons for that. We talked last week with Dr. Cheney, the fact that, well, some people, there are gluten sensitivities. We're seeing an increase in that in a way we hadn't before. How many of you remember this many grocery store recalls of everything? Lettuce, meats, eggs, fruits, frozen vegetables. I mean, it seems like when you go shopping, it's like a minefield. And on top of that, a lot of us are really concerned about pesticide use. And then you find out that organic produce actually has a toxicity level that it's allowed to have that is far more than I think most consumers even think about. And then what does the word natural mean? I don't know. Depends on who you talk to, because the government doesn't really have a standardized definition. So entering into that fray are people like my friend Scott Cooper. Scott, tell us a little bit about how you ended up going as a banker in Virginia and then becoming a farmer, or are you a rancher in South Carolina? What do you call yourself?
No, I'm a farmer. I mean, I guess some people call it a ranch, but if you would have asked me, Karen, 6.5 years ago, if we would ever be doing what we're doing today, we would have laughed at you. But as you know, I was with Chevy Chase Bank, which was a leading bank in the DC market, which was purchased by Capital One. And during the bailouts, basically, I'll just be honest, I lost my job. I had run 5 different branches, very successful in each of the branches, but the last branch did not perform. And Capital One in corporate world, you have 1 year to turn around a bank. And if you don't, they promote you to customer. So that's what happened. And I made a list of all the resources that we had, what our interests were. We're very concerned about our nation's food supply. We are very concerned about healthcare. Our country, we have the most expensive the least expensive food in the world and the most expensive healthcare. And I think there's a correlation there. So as we were looking at our resources, we have a farm that's been in our family for over 100 years. I'm actually in a home tonight that I'm actually in a garage area next to a home that was built by my great-grandfather over 100 years ago. And I'm farming land that, it's in the 5th generation of farming. My dad left here when he was 18, but he's back on the farm with us, not farming, but we're all here together, kind of rebuilding where my grandfather left in the 1960s.
Wow. But I'm seeing more people do that, but it's so neat that you've been able to save that family heritage. It's precious.
Yeah. Well, the motivation for us really, you asked why. It was healthcare. We have a son who's special needs. He's on the autism spectrum and struggles also with mental illness. We would look You know, anytime you go shopping, you look at the obesity rates in our country. You look at the increase in autism. You look at the increase in dementia.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the increase in cancers. And I know the guest you had last week talked a little bit about this. And we just thought, well, we want to play a role in providing all natural meats to the consumer, because I think that's part of the solution.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight is a little bit about the food industry, and then your business, specifically something you've got coming up this summer. And, and I'm really glad to have you, because I do think it's important. And I know that in some areas, clean food's hard to find. We've actually got food deserts, which it's bizarre that you have food deserts, especially in the inner cities. So let me ask you a little bit about this. So you decided to raise beef because of what was going on with your family and your concern. Now, everybody, along with the word natural having different definitions, the word sustainable has probably as many definitions as there are people. So how do you define sustainable? When you talk about sustainable agriculture, what does that mean? That might be a new term for some folks.
Well, let me give you an example. 60, 70 years ago, everything in agriculture kind of moved to a monoculture, whereas before it was a multifaceted culture environment. And we became an industrialized agricultural country, not only for meats, you know, but for our corn, our soybeans, etc. So what used to be a multi-source environment on our farm in the late 60s, when we started leasing it out, and we were very blessed. We had the same farmer, the same family kind of leased it out for all 40 years, actually over 40 years.
Which is unusual.
It is very unusual, and we're very grateful. And actually, some of his family has helped us on the farm here, you know, doing fencing and land clearing and things of that nature. So it's been a great partnership through the generations, actually. But it's been in a monoculture for over 4 decades, primarily raising Bermuda grass for the equestrian market, which is very big. I'm very close to Aiken, South Carolina, and there's a lot of horse people down there.
Yeah.
But it's had the same, you know, chemicals sprayed on it 3 to 4 to 5 times a year. And he was very effective at getting multiple cuts a year, sometimes 4 or 5 cuts a year on this land. But the soil becomes depleted over time when you do that. So what's been very exciting for us is to watch the microbial activity return to the soil. And as we have now expanded, we initially started with about 80 acres fenced in, and we did what's called mob rotational grazing. And some of the people some of the people on this webinar are probably more educated about it than I am. But basically, utilizing the cows' manure and urine in tight places to kind of regenerate the soil. And the goal is to also have poultry come behind that. We'll ultimately have multiple species of animals on the property.
Which actually, too, protects your animals, because when you only have, you know, the same thing in animal husbandry, right? When you have one breed or one type of animal, parasites, pathogens, there's no barrier to them.
Right.
It's like Disneyland, right? if you're a bad guy. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I also remember, I think it was about a TED Talk years ago about doing this in Africa. The mob grazing and replenishing the soils there by just letting the animals do what they're doing and kicking up back, putting the microbes back in. I think it's really amazing. And Gail and I were listening to, is when we were looking for our land, and we don't have 80 acres. We have 4.
Well, trust me.
Still takes him an hour to mow. But, and his tractor is kind of funny. He did that today. But what was interesting is, so we were just kind of listening to things, and do we want to do any kind of farming? And we might actually try to raise mushrooms, but I got enough trees for it. But what was interesting is we were listening to a talk on radical mycology, which is, for those of you that don't know, it's mushrooms, right? And what is so fascinating, because people are worried about toxicity levels in soil, is that things like mushrooms can actually remove the pesticides and the heavy metals. That's the fungus, that's part of their function, is to clean the soils as well. So my encouragement to people is that even though we've got some serious issues that affect the food supply, there's arsenic in the rice. Why? Water. There's a problem with the water. You've got pharmaceutical residues in the water supply. That water supply goes on your crops, right? But that if we can get back to a little bit of the biodiversity you're talking about and the multi-species, the multi-crops, we can actually stop some of this stuff and even reverse it, because the earth really is resilient to being renewed. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And what's exciting to watch, so I said we started with about 80 acres, and we really started with about 40, and then we expanded. And now we're this year, we fenced in the entire property, family property is about 325 acres that we fenced.
Wow,
in.
that's huge.
And I've joined with a partner, the Raven family, which is also from Edgefield County, to form this meat company. They have a farm here as well, and they're in the process of acquiring additional land.
Wow.
So, but what is exciting is not only the microbial activity, but the birds, the bunnies, the wildlife. I mean, all kinds of wildlife in areas that 4 to 5 years ago, it wasn't there because
it was dead.
It was dead. And, you know, it is a regenerative process. And we Americans, I'm going to refer a book here in a little bit, but this author talks about the modern American diet. She calls it MAD. We're so accustomed to being a part of this MAD diet where we're eating processed foods all the time that really don't have the nutritional supplements in the food that we're supposed to be eating on a daily basis. So we think that's an important part to regenerating not just the soil, not just the environment, but also our bodies, and really restoring our healthcare system. So
that's exactly right, because it's interesting that you mentioned that, because when I had my daughter Audrey talking about giving vegetables to her kids, she was talking about how processed foods, and it's really true. I've seen it with people. It makes your palate very, very narrow, and what it accepts is a taste. And I once did a talk on food addiction, not on the emotional or the spiritual side of food addiction, but just how big food, I'm not anti-business, you're not anti-business, right, but these mega corporations are like a whole nother life form.
Yes.
But how they will literally create foods that once you start eating them, you can't stop. They will actually use MRI technology and brain scans to make, for example, when you eat a Dorito, the tip of your tongue feel all the taste. The back of your tongue does not feel the food. Your brain does not register that you ate it. Mm. And so what happens? You eat that whole bag. You're like, geez, I'm hungry. Let's go get a burger.
Right.
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 And yet you've ingested a huge amount of calories that your body and your blood sugar spikes and all this. And it's really a manipulation of not only how people eat, but those natural defenses that we would have for appetite, to recognize when we're full, to recognize when we're truly hungry, those get messed up.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about going to get a hamburger, you know, a lot of people, and I love McDonald's, especially the renovations they're doing today. A lot of them look great inside, and they do have more healthy diets. But one of the challenges that we face in this industry is educating the consumer. You know, and I'm going to just share this. I hope it's okay. I believe in my faith that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, and we are what we eat. And not only are we what we eat, we are what we eats. And when you go and eat beef, they're not carnivores. They're not designed to live inside feedlots where they're just eating, you know, corn all the time and being injected with steroids and hormones. I almost got that word wrong. But the point is that I'm trying to get is the processing that we're doing to provide a natural environment for the cows where they're happy, where they're healthy, where they're enjoying the lifetime that they have here, but they provide a great source of nutrition for us. It is a more expensive product. You know, you're not going to get a hamburger for $1 if you're going to buy grass-fed beef. But what we want to educate Americans on is look at it as your healthcare expense, right? How much are we spending for vitamins? How much are we spending for our medicines, the pharmaceutical industry? And if we invest those dollars through the decades as we're aging in the right kind of food, we'll live longer. So it's a great investment. Some people say, I can't afford to eat healthy. Well, the reality is, if you want to live long, you really can't afford not to.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we talk about. You know, I work on the supplement side largely, but it all works together.
Right.
And people will come to me and they'll have not a very good diet and they'll start supplementing and I'll say, I really feel better. I guess this stuff works. And then the very thing they do next is they start saying, well, how do I change what I'm eating? We just did a veggie challenge, right? And one of the comments I got from somebody was she discovered, to your point about the cost of eating, she said it was actually cheaper to eat fresh fruits and vegetables than they had envisioned it being.
Right.
Right. And then there's a whole gut biome, and little plug for next week. I have a guest coming on who's an integrative health coach to talk about gut biome. And one of the ways that you improve the gut biome is by a wide variety of foods that you eat. And when you talk about, it's one of the reasons why I prefer not to buy vegetarian fed chickens, because guess what they are?
Vegetarian?
No, they're omnivores. They like a good steak.
Oh, right.
Right? They eat bugs and critters. They're omnivores. And so a vegetarian fed chicken is not as healthy as the chicken that's pasture raised and allowed to have some meat in its diet.
Absolutely.
Just like you don't want a cow to have eaten anything but some grass and good hay. And so it is neat. I do see it coming together. Now, let me ask you too. So what does sustainable mean? So for sustainable for you, it's a diversity on the farm.
Diversification of the plant life and animal life on the farm. So it's not a monoculture. It's a reduction really in chemicals used on the property.
Because those also build up in the soil.
Right.
And, and when you talked about, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, you can see over time the soil actually increasing, the depth of the soil, which is, it's impressive to watch.
Yeah. Really. Yeah. It's I think it's neat that the earth was created to be renewed.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of the wasteland that's happened that we can bring back. And one of the things I wanted to ask you too, so I think you kind of addressed it. We were going to talk about how this kind of farming shows stewardship for the environment, because that's a lot of concern for people. I get concerned about the water cycle. Again, because we've got the situation of pharmaceutical residues from people's urine, going. Right. I saw this years ago in, I don't know if it was Scientific American, but some kind of publication like that. This was 15 or 16 years ago that Europe had a problem with pharmaceutical residues in their water.
Okay.
Antidepressants, because so many of the population were on antidepressants.
Yeah.
And that comes back around. And when you talk about the food your food eats, of course, I thought Ron Swanson immediately, right? Do you remember that line he said? Somebody gave him a big salad and he goes, no, this is the food my food eats.
Well,
but what they eat does stay in their muscle residue, which is what we eat when we're eating meat. That's why the antibiotics the chickens eat, or the beef eat, or the pigs come into us. That's why sometimes when people are reacting to something, like in eggs, they're not reacting to the egg itself. They're reacting to what the chicken was fed.
Right. Yep. And so, a couple things that I would add to that, and it's really important. And again, you're a health conscious group, so you already know this probably, but it's really important that we support our local farmers, because the local food supply, meats, vegetables, etc., it boosts your local economy. It supports your local farmer, which is great for a resiliency perspective as well as economics of your local community. But you're also getting the nutrition that you need directly from your environment that you're living in. A lot of our fruits and vegetables that we buy at Walmart, they've been in warehouses for months, and they've been injected with things to look fresh when they're really not. So.
Oh, I know, and it's a real. I tell people that's why when you buy a tomato, it's mealy or tasteless. That's why when you buy some fruit or vegetable at the store and you take it home and like 2 days later, you're like, how did it mold so fast? Because it was old.
But I'll just tell you this, Karen. We got into this. We are in the greater CSRA, which is in Augusta, Georgia. We actually live in South Carolina. I'm about eight miles from Augusta, Georgia. And our company is Sweetwater Grass Fattened Meats. If you live in this region, we would love to have you try our meats and give us your honest opinion. If you live in the region, I also want to share with you that we have a great event coming this fall. Some of your listeners may be aware of, oh my goodness, his name just slipped out of my head. Luke Bryan. Luke Bryan is coming and doing his farm tour on our farm on October 5th. So if you want to come tour our farm, that would be a great time to come.
That's incredible that you're doing that. So now you talked a little bit. I want to get to, how does grass-fed beef differ from conventional raised? By what conventional raised? And then I don't know if you are, I didn't give you a heads up on this one. When I see grass-fed beef in the store, is that really grass-fed?
Well, I believe so. You know, we are 100% grass-fed. We do have some customers that ask for grain finish because the texture is a little bit different. We have not chosen to do that yet, but we may in the future for a particular client. But we're 100% grass-fed versus most of the meat production in the country today. There are cow-calf operations, and then the calves are sold to the market, and they're raised in, you know, industrialized meat producing facilities.
And then, you know, one of the problems of that is those are huge pollutants because you've got the manure you've got the, what they call manure ponds. I mean, that's
right.
How talk about sustainable and an environmental threat. That's not, you can't raise. How many cows would you say is in, do you know, in a conventional?
It's ungodly, to be honest. And from an animal welfare perspective, it's just not, it's not a good quality of life for them. If you come to our farms, either the Ravens or here, our cows are happy cows. And we have docile breeds. They love for you to come out and visit them.
And how is Ethan?
What's that? And
how is Ethan?
Ethan is agile. He's very virile, and he's very effective. I'll tell you, when we bought our herd, Karen, this is kind of an interesting story. The guy that we bought our herd from, he kept Ethan with his girls year round. So the first year we were having calves dropping all the time.
Wow.
And logistically, for us, we didn't want that. So we held him out literally for almost a full year because we wanted our calves to drop in the spring when the grass is starting to grow and it's warming up. Literally about half of my girls had their calves within the first week.
Wow.
I mean, that's how effective he was.
All of a sudden, you're also thrown into the whole calving thing.
Yes.
The care of a newborn. And you had, how much experience did you have raising animals?
Zero. So Susie and I, we never had more than a third of an acre. We always lived in a regular neighborhood in a metropolitan area. And actually, my wife would probably still love to live in a condo somewhere in an urban area. So when you think about us living out here in the country, it's kind of crazy. But so we started with 26 cows. We now have 61. So we've grown our herd, and we've partnered with the Ravens. And we started very slow. I mean, you asked how did we start? We started very slow because, you know, the faster we grow, we figured the bigger the mistakes and the more costly the mistakes. And we read a lot of books. We read from Alan Savory. We read from Joel Salatin.
Mm-hmm.
We studied holistic management techniques. And I'm thrilled to be partnered with the Ravens because not only Dr. Raven, who I've worked mostly with, but his son, who also hopes to get involved at some point as our revenue grows on a more full-time basis. They've been in this for about 7 years longer. So we're now over probably 120, 130 cows, and we're going to start July 9th processing one a week. So we sell by the pound, we sell by the cut, and we also sell, we do cow shares as well.
Cow shares. Okay. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, what is an abattoir? I think that's a word that if you are used to a CSA or buying a cow share or ordering through somebody like yourself, you may know about, but a lot of people don't. What is an abattoir?
Yeah, so I hope I answer the question of what you're looking for. I mean, it's a slaughterhouse, where you go to get your meat processed. And one of the things that we really wanted to do is to process on site. And there are companies that are forming in this paradigm shift that's taking place in agriculture, because where they will do mobile processing units. They will come to your farm and process right on your farm. And from the animal welfare perspective, the most stressful time in a cow's life is when they're in the trailer from the farm going to the slaughterhouse. And there is an impact on the hormone levels and everything.
I was going to say, yeah.
Those final hours of its life. So if you can process the cow right on site, you don't have any of that stress. They're just coming right into a field that they're normally used to. We haven't been able to identify a company that's serving this region at the level that we want to, so that we want to grow. So my partner's acquiring land pretty close to a facility, an abattoir or slaughterhouse that we're currently utilizing.
Wow. So now, how do regulations? Because I read Salatin's book, Folks, This Ain't Normal. And the next one on my list is Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal, because I can relate.
Right.
So how do government regulations, and I think that's been one of the issues in the CSA, and for those of you that don't know what CSA stands for, it stands for Consumer Supported Agriculture, what Scott's talking about, buying from your local farmer, maybe having a subscription for your fruits and vegetables to be delivered. My daughter is working for a CSA this year as a lettuce packer this summer. But are you running into because the reason why I'm bringing this up about the government regulations is is the fact that, and that we just got a question in for you, Scott, and I'm going to get to that as soon as we talk a little bit about the regulations. How does that affect the price of it, what you can do, the availability of this kind of food for the rest of us?
Well, I can't speak specifically about all the regulations. What I do know to be true is if you study the number of processing facilities in our country, it has dropped drastically. I mean, phenomenally. And I think that has to do with the excessive regulations that are taking place. We've been blessed to partner with a local processing unit. It's about 35 minutes from here, and they've been very good to us. They have a great USDA inspector, and that's very important for us because we want to be able to cross state lines. I mean, like I mentioned, I live close to a state line, but my son is still in Spotsylvania, and we have, as you know, we have a lot of friends in Virginia that are very passionate about their food supply, and we want to serve them as well. So we want to be USDA certified so we can go across state lines. Another thing that I will say that we're doing specifically with our processing unit is, and we built a relationship with them, and we're very grateful because we brought in an IT guy who is providing true traceability. And some of your folks may be familiar with
I've never heard of that. What is, you said it's IT, like information technology?
So, and I should have had a package of meat with me where I could show you, but it's going to have a QR code on the label where you, with your smartphone, you can scan the label. You'll be able to tell everything about that animal from birth to plate, which farm it was on. So like right now, we have 3 properties. You'll know if that cow was birthed on my property and then finished at Hank's property, and the date that it was processed and the weight.
Wow.
Everything from, we're probably a couple of years away from that, but the technology is phenomenal. And from an animal welfare perspective, and from a consumer perspective, those that want to know where their food is coming from, because not all of our meat, some people don't know where their meat comes from. Some people value that, and we want to meet that need.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I had no idea that was coming for consumers.
Yep.
Because you hear that a lot, and like I said, Lidl sells grass-fed beef now, and then I can get it at BJ sometimes, but I prefer to buy local if I can. But my question is, and then we have a question about cow shares and milk shares. Is you said you felt that was grass-fed. I just didn't know if that would be farm finished, or if grass-fed is one of those definitions like natural and organic and sustainable that is open to a lot of interpretation.
I think it is. I mean, I think if you get labeled organic, the restrictions, the regulations become much more stringent.
Okay.
So,
okay.
but, you know, from our perspective, no hormones, you know, no steroids, 100% grass-fed, all natural.
Okay, now I've got a question from somebody here, and I think this was in two parts, but I'm not sure because we can't. I have my daughter feeding me the questions in your comments because we can't see them through here because of the technology. But when local farms use Roundup and chemicals, how much better is the fruits and vegetables? The plant is healthier, technically, but now there's Roundup resistant weeds.
Yeah.
And so that's becoming a problem.
I'm not really going to be able to comment about that.
Yeah. So, okay, how about this one? Do farmers who offer beef share option usually offer cow share for the milk as well?
A lot of dairy farmers do, providing raw milk and cow shares. Now, we're not doing any dairy at this point, and I don't know that we will, just from a labor perspective. We don't have the bandwidth to do that. But we do, you know, you can get an eighth of a cow or a quarter of a cow, or a half of a cow. However you want to do it with us, we offer it. And we're putting packages together. Now, we don't have a website yet, but we are up on Facebook.
We are up on Facebook, and I've linked to that several times now. I'll link to that again in this video so that people can go and seek you out. So now about how to buy a cow share. Now, I remember my daughter and I, we actually split a quarter 3 ways. That didn't work out. There's only so many parts to a cow, you know?
Right.
So for me, steak is steak. I guess I know the difference between a ribeye and a T-bone, but maybe not, you know? And so when I'm looking at what I can choose on a cow share, maybe it's just me, but I'm pretty darn confused. I have no idea what to buy. And I think too, the portion size, because one of the things with conventional, you go to a restaurant, you can order a 16 ounce, sometimes an 18, a 12 ounce, 16 or an 18 ounce steak. It's really big. That's a pound of meat at a sitting. And technically a portion control of meat is about the size of your hand.
Right. So we have cut it both ways. So to give you an example on our production, this year we have processed 6 cows so far, and we're almost at the end of June. We're about to enter a phase where we'll be able to process one a week for the remainder of the year. So to answer your question, we've cut it both ways to kind of see what the customer desires. I've had some customers that want their steaks really thick, you know, and really large, and then some that don't. So that's the other reason that we're going with true traceability is it's good for the customer, but we'll also be able to track what's selling and what the consumer likes.
That's awesome.
If you invite me back in a year, Karen, I'll be able to give you more data on what the consumer wants.
Sure. No, I just didn't, you know, because I think for a lot of people, when they're buying a cow share, what would you recommend to a first-time cow share purchaser? What should they look for? How do they decide how much meat to buy? Because when you get it, you don't know how long that's going to last. Because you might use it differently if it's sitting in your freezer than if, say, you had to go buy it every week. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like you, most people have been confused. They didn't know what to do in terms of getting a quarter or a half of a cow. And what I have chosen to do up to now, or you know, most recently, is just require people, if they want to get a half of a cow, that they need to get a minimum, because the largest amount of meat that comes is ground beef, or you know, the ground beef. So if they get 100 pounds of ground beef, and then they can decide what steaks and roasts they want, because we've built up an inventory of that, and just reach a certain dollar amount. Same thing with a quarter of a cow. They can just get, you know, 50 pounds of ground beef, and then pick out what steaks and roasts they want, what they're accustomed to.
Okay.
We can go both ways. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, kind of, because like I said, we split the 3 of us. We were trying to, and then we bought our first one, and she was a sweetheart, and the steer was 2 years old, I think. How old should a cow or steer be when
it's anywhere? Anywhere from 22 to 26 months.
Pretty young then.
Yeah.
Pretty young. And so, so we split it, and I was excited because I know that grass-fed meat, and hers were not corn finished either. It's leaner. There's less fat. The fat is healthier that you do eat because
Right.
I don't know if folks know this or not, but where animals store their toxins, where fish store their toxins, is in the fat. That's where you store yours too, the fat and the muscle tissue. And so that's one of the issues with omega fish oil supplements is most of them are not clean because fish store their toxins in fat. And then when you're using a lot of fish to make a supplement, you're actually concentrating that toxin.
Right.
And most companies will not. I mean, our company actually goes for small fish for that reason. Less toxicity to begin with, and then they triple distill it. It's pretty in depth. It's almost talk about true traceability. They kind of have that. So the thing is, so how would you tell a family of 4 who maybe ate beef twice a week, would they on average be thinking about a quarter of a cow or a half of a cow?
Personally, I would probably encourage them to go with a quarter and see how it works out for them based on their, how they consume food. And then if they want to upgrade to a half, they can. But, we also sell by the package. So, and we're opening a store, but if you're traveling, if you're taking it out of state or you're coming a great distance to get it, you want to get a large quantity.
Yeah, because it'll stay fresher, it'll stay colder together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, so what areas do you serve? You said you serve the central.
Greater Savannah River area. Central Savannah River area is Augusta, Georgia. It's kind of a 7-county region. I'm in Edgefield County, which is right next to Aiken County. But we have I've had a customer come up from the Charleston area and get a quarter of a cow, just because we've made those contacts around the state.
Yeah.
I mentioned Cole. He is currently a truck driver, and he drives down to Savannah actually every week for work. So we're developing clientele down there too.
Okay. Well, are you selling to restaurants?
Not yet. We are working on with relationships with a couple of restaurants.
So you and your family have done this incredible investment. I mean, I know a little bit of what inexpensive fencing costs, and I know what it's going to cost to fence my property.
Right.
And that's not even with the electric fencing and all that kind of stuff. So your family's made a huge investment.
Yeah, I mean, I joked, and I'll tell you a story real quick, if I may. When I came here, because the family, the farm has been in our family for 100 years or longer. When I first started putting up fence, I honestly, Karen, I live in a great community. All of my neighbors are wonderful. And I would have so many people come and stop and talk to me, people who knew my grandparents,
Wow.
Some folks who are now in their 80s who even knew my great-grandmother.
Wow.
To hear some of the stories has been a huge blessing. But because I was starting slow and because the house had basically been vacant, my parents restored the house and have been coming on weekends for over a decade. But there hadn't been a lot of activity here for a long time. And I would tell people I'm starting with a 40-year game plan. I really don't know what I don't know, because a lot of the people here have been in agriculture for a long time. And clearly, they still know a lot more than I do. And my techniques are not their techniques, because I'm part of this paradigm shift that's moving back to sustainable, and I'm not in industrial. And they probably think I'm crazy, some of them. But the truth is, I would say, I'm here for 40 years. So the investment is a long-term investment. It is not minimal. You are accurate. This year alone, I put about $50,000 into fencing. But it's a long-term investment because we know we're going to produce, 60 cows a year here.
And this is what's interesting about the whole clean food, sustainable farming, sustainable agriculture, is farmers ultimately can make more income than they could on the industrial models.
Absolutely. If you go in with the long-term perspective, and you're willing to work hard too. And I think one of the challenges, and I love Joel Salatin, I've been to his place, but some of the books make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's hard work. But there's tremendous value to it. I mean, when you look at what's happening to the environment to restore the environment, how well the animals are being treated, and you know that you are providing a product which is going to help people become more healthy, it's worthwhile. So it's a long-term investment, but you have to be willing to work hard. So I'll go back to supporting your local farmer. Wherever your guests or wherever the people that are listening to this are, from my opinion, it's very important for you to support your local farmer.
Now, speaking of that, how can they find a local farmer, either local or we'll just stay in your area? Maybe they want some fresh pork, fresh chicken, fresh beef. How can they locate a local farmer in their area? Especially, imagine somebody in the suburbs and she's not hanging out at the farmer's market. Where does she go?
Right. Well, I would say start with the farmer's market. Go on Google, do some research, searches on Facebook. Most of the people that are involved in the sustainable movement are on social media as well. When you go and I think it was your daughter you interviewed a couple of weeks ago. She said, when you go to the farmer's market, just verify if it is indeed locally produced, because some of that stuff is shipped in.
Trucked in. Oh yeah.
But it's important for your health. It's important for your community. But one of the issues that I work on is the insecurity of our electric grid through High Frontier. And I don't want to get into all that today, but there are a lot of vulnerabilities in our national security infrastructure. And we live in a just-in-time society where everything that's on the shelves at Walmart, it was put on the shelves within the last 72 hours. So if there is a problem, the power goes out, that's going to be out in 72 hours. If you live where there's a snowstorm, you see it. But the point is, if you're supporting local food supply now, you're building an insurance policy for if there ever is a secure
or just
electric grid.
Or just any kind. I mean, you're building it. Hey, we live in a hurricane zone, right?
Yeah. Yes. I know right where you are.
Hugo wiped out South, right? You guys, your state really bore the brunt of Hugo.
Yes.
And so that network is important there for a lot of reasons. The soil health is important there for a lot of reasons.
Right.
Right. The Dust Bowl was an issue of monoculture.
Well, and I'll tell you one thing too, Karen, when you travel, so when I moved here in 2014, I worked in the upstate I would travel up there on Monday mornings and come back on Saturday night. And between where my farm is and Greenville, South Carolina, it all used to be small farms. And you know what it is today? It's all pine trees. It's 100% pine trees, or 90% pine trees. So, but it's starting to change back where people are moving back to the farm to do these kind of agricultural techniques for health purposes. So we need to support them.
I agree. So you see a real positive future for clean food.
Absolutely. And what I love about this too, Karen, is it's, I hate watching the news anymore. I don't know if any of your listeners watch the news, but I spend about 5 minutes on each section, each brand, if you will, and then just turn it off. This is a unifying issue. What we put in our bodies, it unifies us. Our healthcare, it should unify us. So that's why I like it. That's why I'm a part of it.
No, I think it's awesome. I'm so grateful that you came on. So it is Sweetwater grass fattened.
Yes, Sweetwater grass fattened meats. Currently just beef. We are going to add poultry. We are going to add lamb.
I have a lamb farmer just a few miles from me. And here's what's interesting too, is they started, she grows lavender and lamb. And they started, I think, in their late 40s, early 50s. Bought I think a 15 or 20 acre piece. It reminded me of you. And she was telling me their story because it was very similar. We just wanted something different. We feel sustainable and clean food is important. She sells her lamb directly in the farmer's market. You can buy a lamb share if you want. but it's very similar. They a lot of nights, a lot of days fencing by hand.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but it's been fun.
That's so awesome. So people can find you on Facebook. I'm also going to tag it here. They can come visit you in the fall when Luke Bryan comes on his farm tour to your farm. And thank you so much for being here. And let me just kind of do a promo for next week. Next week, we're going to have Debbie Miller. She's an integrative health specialist. We're going to be talking about the human biome and gut health, the impact that that has on, and this whole thing about clean food and getting your veggies in and getting your activity in. Scott has been improving his biome just by being outside. I don't know if you know that, but you can improve gut health just by being outside and getting your hands in a little bit of dirt. Don't eat the dirt, but just by being out and about in it actually improves your gut health, and that improves mental health, that improves your immune system and your ability to eat a wider variety of food, because our digestion systems are they're trashed.
It's all connected. Can I add one more thing, Karen?
Absolutely.
Based on what your next guest is going to be talking about, bone broth. We have a lot of customers that are buying bones to make bone broth. And actually, that is a one product, believe it or not, that I'm out of stock on right now is bones.
I buy mine from, I get mine from Eastern Shore, from Phil Cove. And I buy my bones for that, and sometimes for the dog. But the one time we did get the cow share, it was the only time I really felt good about giving them liver treats. Because grass-fed cow liver is healthy. I wouldn't eat conventionally raised cow liver because the function of the liver is to process toxins.
Right.
So a conventionally raised cow liver, I wouldn't give that to my dog.
I also just want to thank you for what you're doing, to educate so many people across the country. I think it's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's fun. It's fun to reconnect with you on this. It's been fabulous to have you. And Scott, any questions that we get, just hang out in the group a little bit. If there's any more questions, we can answer them. But if not, we're going to bid you good night. And please give my regards to Susie.
All right. God bless. Same to deal. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.